The Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got episode 91 with Mr. Jon
and Jared.
Mr. Jon.
Mr. Jon and Mr. Jared.
That's
how we'd like you to refer to us from now on.
This is going to be a great episode, Jon Henninger, because not only are we going to talk about Between the Pines, a week number dos, talking about little known Anna. Devoted Anna. We're also bringing in another female. Anna's not in the room.
No, she's not here.
What we're going to...
She has passed.
Are you ready for this guest, Jon?
I would love to know.
You know who I'm going to say. Susan Dalrymple.
Wow.
Did you like that?
I felt like the emphasis was on the wrong syllable.
I said it correctly. That's why.
Dalrymple?
Dalrymple. Like Rumpelstiltskin. She's going to talk about this later in there.
Pronunciation aside, I feel like the emphasis, like it's Dalrymple.
Well, if she's told me
that's Dalrymple.
Well, I'm going to say it like that from now on so I say it correctly. But I'm excited about this conversation
because
Susan is one of our favorite
awesome.
people.
Yeah.
And she's making a difference in the lives of people, her and both her husband, through their life coaching, their counseling. And we're going to talk mental health, which is kind of a crazy thing. And here's one crazy thing. I wish we could have talked for another hour.
Yeah.
This is a shorter conversation than I really wanted it to be, but it helps us stay on topic. But she shares a little bit about her history in Southern California, how she grew up, and now her and Les really a lot of times too, working with couples, and I think that's going to be a big thing. We were talking about this, the divorce rate going off on a downer right at the top of the thing.
Welcome to the show, everyone.
The divorce rate among Christians is higher than the divorce rate among non-Christians right now.
Really?
Didn't you tell me that?
I did not tell you
that. You did
that.
not tell me that?
No.
Somebody told me that. And after the conversation that we had with Susan, I'm now not surprised at that.
Really?
It makes more sense because I'll let that conversation wait for that.
Mm-hmm.
Speed ahead if you want to listen to that. It's a great conversation. But before we get to Susan Dalrymple, we are going to talk about Anna. Now, that's a name you could say easily.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When this came out, when we were talking in March, whatever, I don't know, it wasn't that far long ago. Whenever you said, here's the people we're going to be looking at for Between the Pines, meaning between the lines.
Right.
Anna, I really had to think, who's Anna?
Right.
Because I forgot.
Right.
I forgot that she is the little known. But what a story this is. This is one of the best sermons of the year, Jon Henninger.
Really?
Yep, it is.
Wow.
Because there's just a lot of punch and a lot of sincerity and a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It's really a very sincere message, I think. And I think a lot of people will reach out. Because again, we have soft hearts this time of year. And those soft hearts gets, soupy over some sad things that Christmas things brings.
Right.
And two, it's a rough year for some people that have lost people during this time of year. It just brings up a lot of emotions. So I think that being said, the emotions of Christmas, this is a great lesson. And I think a lot of people, especially your two big points, man, they're so good.
I appreciate that encouragement, Jared. And it's one of those, even people here on our staff, like you just said, you talk about Anna.
Ooh.
And you're like, oh yeah, Anna.
Like the coworker that you thought you knew, but you're like, wow, okay.
But in fairness, there's 3 verses about her in the whole Bible. So it's not like, it's not like you really missed a huge portion of Scripture by not being familiar with her story. So
yeah. Hey, before that, you want to give a Carbondale update?
Carbondale update.
You want to talk Carbondale?
This just in.
So here's the thing. This is not going to be the last episode of the Central Weekly, but we might not have one next week. And we might not have one until the finale of the Central Weekend. Weekly.
The Central Weekend.
And here's and it's because of Carbondale. Because as you know, maybe not the audience, we bought a house in Carbondale.
Yeah.
We might close on that house either next week or the week after.
Okay.
So I just don't know if I'll have the capacity to do the weekly anymore. Plus, I'm super excited, and we're not going to hint too much at it, but I'm super excited about what the potential of a podcast, not the Central Weekly, because we're going to close that chapter.
Yeah.
But of what the Central family brings into a podcast in the future.
Yeah.
I think there's still some things. There's a lot of talk between you, me, Eric, and some other people. But I'm just excited because I want to close this off. If something new happens, that's awesome. I'm excited about that. But yeah, I think we might wait until January to do a final episode, but I don't know. So you might not hear from the weekly for a couple weeks. We'll see though.
Or you might.
You might. I really don't know.
Stay tuned.
But yeah, with Carbondale.
So yeah, Carbondale update.
So tell us where we're at, kind of building wise.
I mean, probably the biggest deal, right? I mean, is that you guys have a house and you are officially moving south, and then also your in-laws.
Yeah, so whenever we said that we were going, that was a big like gut check. We're like, our biggest support system,
100%,
is Maria's parents.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, they help with homeschool. They help with just the kids. Because a lot of times with a family of 5, especially with 3 little ones that are pretty much triplets, divide and conquer is a good thing.
Yeah, right.
Because hey, I can take them for a ride. I can take them to the park, especially when you're trying to homeschool and all that kind of stuff. So we went on the faith ledge of saying, hey, we're still going to do this. And then maybe that'd be awesome if they came with us. Oh, I don't know how that. I mean, they live in Salem. He's an elder. Yeah. But his farm came on sale that he has in Carter, just like out of nowhere. And we're like, wow, maybe they're thinking. And then they told us, yeah, if you're moving, we're going with you.
Which is just...
It's just amazing.
It's so...
Yeah.
It's how family should be, really.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool just to see them make that move with you, that vote of support for your ministry there. I mean, Haven and I go to the zoo all the time. And... I love the polar bears and the grizzly bears, but my favorite is the Dole bear. That's right. Ed and Christy Dole bear.
That's good. That's good. But yeah,
thank you, man.
But they bought 4 acres over there, kind of I'm going to switch that, over there on the east side of Carbondale. So we're going to be on the east side, and then the church is going to be on the west side. So it's going to be good.
Very cool.
Yeah. So all that.
And so building, otherwise, I mean, like building stuff, it has been gutted and scraped, and studs are.
You were there yesterday.
I was there yesterday. Yeah. Yep. And so. The outer studs are up, and they're getting ready to. They should be doing some plumbing stuff today, running some plumbing lines, and then some stud walls will probably start going up maybe next week on the inside, and there's block going up on the outside. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of construction stuff, and I mean, I talked to the guys yesterday, and we are on target for our March open. So praise God.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's been neat to watch the creative art staff, especially Fran and Steve and Aaron and Eric, just kind of get all the things purchased that we need.
Yeah.
And just the eye for detail those guys have. Yeah. They're the right guys on this staff for this reason.
For sure.
It's going to be great. And I'm just excited to get down there and really start that relationship building, because it's almost like we've started these core people, but it's like they've almost just been at arm's length, but now we can, have coffee and just really build that up. And looking into what we talked about too, having some groups there that are going to maybe meet in the area come January.
Yeah.
And it's just more exciting. And our kids are so excited about it too. They're just ready to go. I mean, not only are we living with those in-laws, there's 9 of us in a house. That's going to be nice to have all of our LaCrone stuff all in one place. Yeah. So Maria's excited about that too.
Yeah, so, I'm sure she is.
But yeah,
that's so there's very, very exciting, Jared.
Yeah, we're super excited too. And I think Christmas, we're going to have a little bit of an element, kind of give the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm excited because actually next week we're going to shoot some video stuff down there and on location, and get some stuff ready for Christmas at Central, in which we'll talk a lot about Carbondale and what God is doing there, and what we're praying that God continues to do there. And so we're gonna be down there, and then you and Maria are doing communion at Christmas at Central, and so
Christmas at Central
kind of put a face to the place for some folks. And
we talked about putting our face on the place, but then we thought, no, probably not good.
Well.
I mean, yeah. But here's what's really cool. This has been like a transition week for me, because Ashton Boyer, the one and only, she's taken over a lot of the stuff with communication. Right. So you might hear her on the Central podcast, the one where we take your sermon, we put it in podcast form, we put that on our website and on podcast providers. She's going to be doing that. She's going to do a lot of she's going to be responsible now for our online and our TV congregation. So she's going to be great. I've even just seen her working with social media, and she's attention to detail. She's creative, but yet she has such a great heart for that. And to see what she's did with the hearts of a lot of kids in Kid Depot now, to bring that into a larger scale, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and she has a good eye.
She does.
Yeah,
she does. And today was the last bus day.
Wow.
Final bus day.
That is
I'm grateful to be done.
Reason for celebration,
But
man.
it was fun. I had some of the girls got me cards,
Mm-hmm.
and that was super special. One of the guys who's a Cardinal fan that we tease each other about, he got me a Cubs glass tumbler.
No way.
And I did not expect it. And here's what's cool: those guys even said, "We're gonna have to start coming to church, Jared, so we can see you more."
Wow.
Well, they call me Mr. C, which is weird because that you could tell they're not really listening. When I said my name at the beginning of the year last year when I started, I said Mr. Lacrone. And they just heard the C, and then it just took off. And I don't want to correct them, especially the new kids that come in. While there's half of them this new year that was saying Mr. C, I don't want to, So I just let it be. I embrace the Mr. C.
There's a real good chance I'm going to get you a T-shirt that says Mr. C on it.
That's good. And then have a school bus. I told the one girl that says she wants to do tattoos, that she could do it, I'll do a bus tattoo when she gets thing. Probably not going to know her, but we'll see.
When she gets what?
When she gets her license for tattooing. Because she wants to do that. I said, I'll be one of your first customers. You can put a bus on my shoulder. Do you have any shoulder tattoos, John?
I do have a shoulder tattoo. Thanks for bringing that up, Jared.
You're welcome. Mr. C brought that up.
I'm going to try and find this girl and personally help her get her tattoo license just to ensure you have a bus tattoo.
Let's talk about Between the Pines. Again, back to this super important lesson. 10 minutes later, we're back. Number one, your first point, before we actually get to number one, I liked your little Anna story that you had. Anna story.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you know any Annas growing up, John?
My friend had a sister named Anna. Of course, there's Let It Go, Elsa and Anna.
That's how I kind of rang through. When you were telling that story, I was thinking of a little Jewish girl that kind of looked like Anna.
Yeah.
Just running through the streets of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
You're a creative guy, John.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah. I'm on the encouragement train today. You're welcome.
Take it. So I mean, obviously took some creative liberties just on her childhood and all that, because literally we have 3 verses to go off of. But I think that if you can kind of take some pieces from the culture of the day, and I mean, there's a lot of safe assumptions that you can make about Anna's life, right? And so kind of paint her life through that lens just a little bit, and then what we do know is that stuff started to come together for her, and then her husband died 7 years in. And then her husband died, and rather than buy a ticket to the bitter train, she ends up in the temple and serves God in the temple in a full-time capacity, finds her identity inside of God things for the rest of her life. Yeah.
I mean, and we're talking, this is like first century stuff going on here. When you lose a husband in your first century and you don't remarry, that's your life support.
That's what I'm saying. Like
no Social Security, not getting any 401k checks.
I mean, her entire life is wrapped up in this man who just died.
Yeah.
Her hopes for children in the future, her name, her livelihood, her complete identity is wrapped up in the man who just died. And like I said in the sermon, there was real potential for a turning point in a negative direction at that point in her life.
Speaking of points like that, your first point, Anna.
Gosh,
Anna turned to God and continued to turn. And I think almost more important than that point was just how you said, she didn't get on the bitter train. She made from a struggle, her identity changed for the godly and not for herself and her self.
Right. Actually, the lead into that point was this. She in her heartbreak, in her moment of tragedy, she turned to God.
Yeah.
And I talk to so many people who go through so many difficult times, and people rarely stay the same through a really tough time. When you're talking about a faith testing, just a really trying season in life, people rarely stay the same spiritually, and we either walk toward our faith or away from our faith. And there is this human pull for us to run from God in the midst of our heartache. But then, there's scriptures like that scripture from James that says, draw near to God and He'll draw near to you. And then there's that one from Psalms that says, He's close to the brokenhearted and He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. And so there's a lot of scripture to support God's nearness in those times, but in our humanness, we need to make the decision to turn to God and not away, as hard as that is. Yeah,
you're so right, because the valley will change us. And it's like you said when we were talking, God doesn't go anywhere. He's there in with the valley. You just need to turn to him. I think what were we talking about that? Like he doesn't like you have to chase after him. He's right there.
Right. I mean I think in my opinion, which is really all it is, the scripture from James that we talked about, and I talked about in the sermon, but I mean, like God's draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. I think that kind of sometimes we get this impression like, well, I've got to take a step towards God for him to take a step towards me. But the reality is he couldn't love you anymore. He couldn't be any closer to you than he is. I mean, he couldn't do anything on his end to be closer to you than he's already done. And so the action is on our side in making that turn toward him. And in that turn, we find this different kind of understanding of his actual nearness through the whole thing.
Gosh, I love that I have a guest that is really going to play right into this. I mean, what she talks about our mental health and how we've fallen so prey to so many things. It's just neat to hear that. So I'm excited again for people to hear the conversation with Susan. But I love a little sub point for that was our struggles usually blind us to the opportunity. She said something like that.
Yeah.
And I love that you stopped in the middle of a lesson and prayed for people.
Well, I mean, it's just such a thing, man.
Perfect.
I mean, there's no real reason to move past it. I mean, that's an opportunity for us to pause and pray for those people specifically who are walking that road right now.
Because I think it's just so important that you did that, because it's like you probably brought up a lot of feelings with that first point in a lot of people. So rather than not to gloss over it and move on, I'm not saying that you would have done that, but I'm just saying to let people process a little longer with the Holy Spirit, with godly prayer, and talking to him about that before, and then they're able to kind of breathe in that, process that, and then move to the next point, because it's so good. Your point, your second point, Anna's belief and devotion was not contingent on her blessing. How often do we don't say it, but we think it and we perform it.
And
the blessing has to come, then I will do what I need to do.
I will go further and say, like, I'm not knocking anybody down or saying anything bad about anybody else, right? Because I think there's a lot of good that comes from a lot of ministries. But you will find entire movements of Christianity who will basically pitch that concept. I mean, like, you give to receive. And there's a time and a place for that. I mean, God says in Malachi, to test me in this. There's a place for all of that. But what I think is the really applicable and relatable part of Anna's story is that her life of devotion wasn't in pursuit of the blessing. That's not what it was. It was a life of devotion based on just that, serving God, living her entire life to serve him.
Yeah, and back to the beginning, I think that's why it's so important to set the story of what her childhood could have been like, to look at now 84 years old and how many years that she's been without a husband.
63 years, yeah.
And now she stayed in that lifestyle of service. And again, that's just so important. 'Cause then almost on the flip side, just like, okay, when I'm successful, that means because I did things the right way. We just got done reading through Job, and I think that a lot of his friends, air quotes, that came around him just like, oh, you must have done something wrong, Job, because there's a hidden sin there. And I think that, and again, there's truth in some of that,
right,
like you said, but then we make that truth our theology.
Yeah.
And that's when it's just dangerous. And I'm glad to see, again, that Anna has not let that happen. I don't know if you changed it, because Thursday we were talking about this. Hayden made a point in our little talk after your lesson on Thursday. That was, hit me in the face. She only had 3 verses.
Right. I said, I added what Hayden had said. I added it kind of at the beginning when I was describing Anna. I mean, like, you would have liked her. She's the kind of person who, had the kind of attitude like, oh man, I only got 3 verses in the Bible. No. Anna was the kind of person like, I can't believe God would allow me 3 verses in the Bible.
Yeah. I think that's so good.
I do too.
And I think that just shows her devotion. And I think this is a lesson, again, that people, especially when they feel like they're not receiving their blessing, to still dig in, find God, because he's right there, and just really look at what's God showing me in this?
Yeah.
And just your points, because there was like those points that you were making about people that you've seen that have done this devoted life. Gosh, it's almost, I wonder if sometimes the same people were coming to our heads.
For sure. Yeah.
Gosh, it was so good.
And go ahead.
Yeah, and it was like crazy. So Thursdays and Fridays, you have a sermon run through.
Right.
Okay? And I'm going to paint the picture here because I'm good at it. So while you were doing this,
right.
Sheila Tackett.
Right.
If you know Sheila, you know Sheila. Sheila Tackett's in there in the worship center, and her ex-husband's in there with her, helping her. Right. And because of her devotion to her task of getting the pews ready with the pins, with the envelopes, and her devotion to that. She just got out of the hospital. She had a major surgery 3 weeks ago, had some complications, had an infection last week, but she's here doing that because she feels called to it. She's not going to get on the pity train, but yet she's here doing that work. And gosh, that's going on during your lesson.
Right.
So it's like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I almost said it, like just because, and then,
And another like side point that, again, a lot of people are like, I don't know what they're talking about. I sent you a video this morning of a man in a wheelchair that was singing and leading worship to, what was the song? Faith Foundation.
Yeah, Firm Foundation.
Firm Foundation. Yeah. And again, a guy in a wheelchair doesn't have use of his legs.
Yeah.
And yet he's there devoted to this, worshing God in front, leading other people.
Yeah, leading
worship.
worship.
And he's not on the pity train saying, "Oh, I can't do that because I'm limited." But using not seeing yourself through what I do have. He has an amazing voice and he could still worship God rather than looking at what you don't have. Yep. And that's so often in our life, we look at what we don't have, or we value people on what they don't have, and we give them a negative before looking at what they do have and seeing them through God's eyes.
Yeah, that's good.
So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like
Yeah.
That's good, John. That's it. That's all I got.
It's time for your interview.
Interview with Susan Dalrymple. I did do speech class. I won't give you the names of those teachers because I don't know if they did a great job. Effingham Elementary Education right there. I mean, that's all I had. I went and did high school and college. It didn't sound like that was all I had. So let's throw it over to Susan. And gosh, this is a good story.
I can't wait.
And we're going to have maybe her on, not this podcast because we're limited on our time, but hopefully we have her on in a sphere of where she can be more of an influence because her voice right now in this is so good. So I'm excited for that, but we'll be right back after this conversation with Susan. And we're back with the Central Weekly, episode 91, and we have a very special guest in the podcast studio here in Mount Vernon. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan Dalrymple.
No, Dalrymple.
I'm going to say it right one of these days. Well, here we go, Susan. That's the one and only time I will attempt your last name.
That's all right.
Right now, we are super excited because I know you, but I don't know you.
Right.
So it's going to be great for the audience, our podcast audience, to really get to know you because I bet they've heard of you. I bet they maybe know a friend that knows a friend.
No.
But you're still relatively new to the Central family. So I'm anxious to hear and get your story because really the reason we have the Central Weekly is to tell stories about how God is working in, around, and through the Central family. And here's the big reason why I wanted to bring you in. We're going to talk a big thing about mental health. Okay. Counseling and life coaching is your repertoire right now, and I know of a lot of people that are really impacted by your wisdom, how the Holy Spirit's been working in your life. So I'm going to really put you on this pedestal right now, and then we're going to work your way up.
Because I will fall off fast.
So Susan Dalrymple.
Rimple.
Oh, I got that in there that time. Dalrymple. I'm excited. So let's talk about you, and then we'll kind of get into the mental health, what our society's looking at today, what you feel the Lord's telling you, what we need to know as the podcast audience.
Ooh, okay, fun.
So Susan, tell us a little bit about you, maybe how you grew up, your faith. Just kind of tell us a little bit about that now. And of course, Mr. Les.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so I grew up in Southern California and did not grow up in a Christian home. But early on, the Lord started kind of pursuing me, and through friends' families, they'd invite me to church, and I would just weep. I remember crying even as a young, like 8 years old, and I remember meeting one of the pastors, and him saying something to me like, "You're just full of love." And I remember thinking, nobody ever said that to me before or saw that in me before. And so church, when I went with friends and their families, was this safe, happy place. And I knew I wanted more of it. Yeah. And then had kind of a little bit of a rocky upbringing. Okay, not a little, but it was a rocky upbringing. And as a teenager in Southern California, these were wild times in the 80s. So I was involved in some crazy stuff, and the Lord knew that probably that I might be heading down a wrong path, and He just stepped right in front of me and said, "I have a different plan for you." And I went to Calvary Church in Costa Mesa, and Chuck Smith was the pastor there, and I got involved in a small group there, and I accepted the Lord, and I was on fire, and I mean on fire, to the point that my family was like, "I don't want to hear about God anymore," and I decided, somebody with wisdom said, just stop talking about it and just start living it, and eventually my entire family was saved.
That's amazing. So growing up, that was really something, church wasn't something. It made it something you went to, you got that full of love, which is so cool to have that as a young, and still remember that. But then it came time to, when you're growing up, maybe you went through those crazy phases, but then you have a family that probably didn't want to listen to that because they knew that old Susan.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly what it was. And so, anyway, I ended up, that I never lost that fire. And I never had a period where I didn't, want all of Jesus all the time. But of course you grow and you learn more. And so, so sadly, my first marriage ended in divorce, which was not a happy thing at all. But God just blessed me like crazy by letting me meet Mr. Wonderful, Les Dalrymple. He is the best man I have ever known. And we moved to Mount Vernon about 6 years ago now. Yeah. And before we came here, we were in Connecticut, and he said, when he got transferred with his job, he said, "Oh, we can go back to the church that I went to." And I thought, oh, well, he lived here before with his first wife and raised his kids here. And that was a little bit awkward. I bet. But at the same time, I was like, you know what? I watched the service online and I thought, let's go there. And I've just loved it ever since and felt that this was home.
Yeah, it's neat because I was telling Les the other day, because we had a chance to talk, and I remember when I first laid eyes on Les. That sounds weird, but we were eating with the Hittingers at Agave, which we used to do all the time, and then he was eating by himself because he was in town. I think maybe getting the job was coming, and of course him and Sarah have a job history together. And so she just went on and on about, oh my gosh, if he's coming back, this is amazing. And I was like, I got to know about this. And then you came after that. And when you know that there's a light in somebody, when everybody else tells you about that light in that person. And even before I met you, it was neat to hear stories about how you've impacted people's lives, just so being a light in their life. And I know that you and Les have been that, and you will continue to be that. So your central story was really, you heard it, you watched it because you were coming into town. And that's 6 years ago.
It was over 6 years ago that we watched it online. And I remember Jon was the worship leader, and I thought, I'll be honest, he was so incredibly talented. I thought, is God going to really be there? Because to have that kind of talent in a church, sometimes it's all about that, and it is not all about that here. There are a lot of talented people, but the worship is true worship, and so I have just God's just done nothing but pour into me since I've been here.
So let's talk today. In Mount Vernon, I know, before we get into kind of what your professional job is now, one of the big things that you have helped out with James McKenzie is a class that you guys have done with basically in our group setting called...
Oh, the last one?
Yes.
Oh, Relationships Matter.
Yes.
Yeah. Wait, is it called that? I'm trying to think now. No, went blank
it's
all
funny
of a sudden.
we put our own spin on it. But it's just been neat because, again, I bring that up just because it's been neat you're officially in that realm the last couple years, I would say maybe 2 years now, leading groups here at Central.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, maybe even longer than that. Yeah. We've done several now, and lots of really good ones.
So tell us about your group experience at Central.
Oh, okay. Well, honestly, we were here for a little while, and we weren't making connections. We knew people's faces, but we hadn't made relationships, deep relationships.
Yeah.
And so I said, we have got to get, we know this from past experiences in different places. You have to be in a small group if you want to get to know people. And our very first group was Rooted. We are still friends with all of the people in that group. And we just grew to love people. And then we were asked to facilitate several groups. And of course, those facilitating, a lot of times people shy away from that because they think they have to know everything, and you literally don't. We're learning along with everyone, and we just kind of do the organizing of
That's a good way to put
text
it.
messages
Exactly.
and stuff. But that's where you become family with people, you know. And in fact, I'm having a potluck with our small group that ended a few weeks ago, because we need to know that when we go to church, we see people that know us and care about us, and that we matter to someone, you know, and that's how you get connected.
Yeah. And it's neat because groups levels a playing field and opens up an avenue of vulnerability for people.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And it's neat because then it's like once that's opened up, then whatever study that is gets added upon that foundation of vulnerability and openness. And it's almost like once that opens up, it's amazing what God can do in those group settings, the friendships that can happen, the life change that could happen. And that was one of the things about when we did our baptisms about a month ago, seeing that life change, seeing that, you know, those people that were getting in the water, helping with those baptisms, because that life change happens when people are around other people, learning lessons together, and all around what the Lord is doing through His Word and through His Holy Spirit.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk today.
Okay.
I think this, because I don't know the past with you. I just know currently you are a life coach. And so tell us about that. I know that you are a counselor, but you just don't get to charge like a counselor. So tell us a little bit about that and how that got started.
Well, it is a little bit different in that you're really trying to help people move forward. You do, of course, do some looking at family of origin and things like that, because that matters. That's how we become who we are. A lot of times it has such a big impact on who we are and how we do relationships and how we view the world. So, but I talk about a God thing. I have always done counseling in different settings. I was a principal at a Christian school for years, and then I was a counselor before that. And I've always done it, maybe not with the title of counselor. God will use your gifting no matter what you're doing. If you're selling insurance, you might still be counseling. You might be. It doesn't. If you are open to Him leading and using what He's put in you, He's going to do what He's going to do wherever you are. And so I thought private practice, that ship had sailed for me. That wasn't going to happen. Excuse me. And then I'm friends with Lindsay Greenwald, who is co-owner of Cornerstone. And one day I went in to pray with her and see how I could pray for her. And she said, we wish we had a receptionist. We really need a receptionist. We can't afford one. And I wasn't working at the time. And I'm like, let me come in and volunteer and answer phones. Well, when I heard the hurting people calling and trying to get in, and we had a wait list at that time even of over 100 people, I thought, oh my goodness, Lord. So I just was constantly praying. They happened to have an open office, and she asked me to start working in there. And I said, well, I don't really want to pursue licensure here in Illinois. That's a lot of rigmarole that I don't want to do. And she said, no, you can do life coaching. I'm like, what is that? Is that actually a thing? And looked into it and did the certification and have not looked back since. And it's just been phenomenal. Just there are a lot of really hurting people all over the world. You know, my husband and I went to a conference in Nashville recently, the American Association of Christian Counselors conference. There were 7,000 mental health professionals, from psychiatrists all the way to pastors to everything in between. And all the speakers that were there said, we need to be prepared. There's a mental health tsunami coming, and not enough providers. People are not going into this field. Like it isn't the most high paying thing in the world for people anymore. And so, so that just got me thinking, like, I want to do this the rest of my life, you know, because there is such a need. There's no lack for unfortunately, for hurting people, but giving them Christian counsel and basing the advice or the coaching that you're doing on the principles that God's put in the Bible for us. That's the quickest way to mental health, like good mental health.
Exactly, yeah.
He laid it out in his word, but we don't always just know where to look when we sit down and read God's word. We don't know how to navigate certain things sometimes, and you need someone else to help you sometimes. We all have blind spots, including me, and I have people that I talk to. And you know, I heard somebody say one time that counseling or coaching is a tool, and just like a hammer is a tool. And you could build a house without a hammer. You could find a rock or a log to drive in nails. But when there's a tool that's designed for that, why not pick up the tool? Why not use the tool? And that's a lot of times people don't want to go to counseling or go to coaching because they feel like that's embarrassing, or they're weak, or they can just figure it out themselves. And it's a shorter route to getting where you need to go.
And they might. But
gosh,
the life change. I've seen counseling. I've had a couple counselors in my life, and it's amazing because I had my first counselor he was a Christian, but he wasn't a Christian counselor. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But like to see the difference in my own, and I'll just speak for myself, to see the difference in my own spiritual growth between a non-Christian counselor and a Christian counselor, it's like, it's important to talk to somebody and to get those skills. But yet when you bring a spirit-filled counselor into a room with you, that's powerful. And I can't speak that enough. And it's just like, and that's my encouragement to people that are listening. You are not, it's like some people think they're too messed up. No. And like, it's like, no, or they're not messed up enough. That sounds weird to say that.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And it's like, no, I think because we have such a deficiency in quality relationships now, that's why, and that's one of the many reasons why counseling and mental health is such a big thing right now. And it's like, and COVID almost woke us up to that.
That's exactly right.
It's been there for a while, the way our society's been going. But it's just like COVID woke us up. And then now we're almost getting back into normal, but normal's not what normal was. And we know it's like now we're almost aware that tsunami's coming. Yeah. And it's just like, but again, we need, and that's another thing, we need more Christian people, Christian counselors to do that.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So what else do you got? Now that because this is what we left this a little open-ended. That ends the Jared LaCrone talking points. What do you feel, Susan Dalrymple? I tried.
Rimple.
I tried. Tell us what do you think we need to know as the podcast audience? We talked about this because I know I wanted to bring you in a couple weeks ago. It just didn't work out for the schedules when Jon was talking about mental health. But gosh, when he talked about those ruts and making those new ruts, that's something that we need to understand, that we do that on default. And it's
sat there going, preach, brother, preach, because they're called neuropathways. And they've found that our brain is neuroplastic. It has this neuroplasticity. So we can form those ruts. And they, just like a truck driving down a road, it's going to form those. So when we have, say we have issues, say we grew up in a family where there was alcoholism or there was addiction or abuse or whatever, those have formed some pretty deep ruts.
Yeah.
And but the good news is that new ruts, new neural pathways can be formed, but you need somebody to help you walk through that. But so I say this all the time. So what psychologists and what psychology they have all those big fancy words: cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT therapy. Yep. That's actually, it's taking every thought captive. Yeah. It is literally reframing as another big terminology. There's mindset, reframe, all these words that we are hearing in our culture right now. But God came up with them first in that, our brains go on default thinking a lot of really toxic thoughts, negative thoughts, things about ourselves that literally make changes physiologically in our body. Yep. So that's why we have more depression, we have more anxiety. Everyone has anxiety, and they're not making it up or overreacting. Yeah. Their bodies and brains are not doing what they're supposed to do because we have such a fast-paced culture. Yeah. Everything is so busy. Yeah. And we rush. We don't have and this has been preached from the pulpit, we don't have these margins that we need to sit at the feet of the Savior so that he can refill us and refuel us and refresh us. And so we end up getting ourselves in these places where we can't think straight, or we can't sleep. And once you can't sleep, we are really susceptible to all kinds of things going on, but mostly susceptible to Satan lying to us. Yeah. And we're vulnerable. What does the word say? He seeks to kill, steal, and destroy. And that's what he's doing. And he's prowling all the time, looking for these areas where he can get to us. If he can get us overtired, overstressed, overworked, over all the, to the point where we are just running on fumes, we are vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that's a thing where so much in our culture we're just surviving and we're not thriving, especially as Christians. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Almost that twofold diagnosis of what our current culture is. One of, we've just had a culture for decades now where Christ is not in it.
Right.
And also we've had a culture that has overwhelmed us with its busyness, with its information overload. Our minds aren't meant to have this much information on a daily basis.
Exactly. Yep.
And so that's the crazy thing about mental health. The world is waking up to that that they have never before. But it's also if with Christians, if we're able to reframe that to the original of what God intended for us to do, it's right. I hope that it's a twofold approach, that yes, the world's get behind that, but the Christians get behind it way more, because if we could have emotionally healthy Christian people that are invading this world with the love of God, that's how things change.
Right.
And it's not going to change on end or with anything else besides that. Yeah. So what do you see, Susan, in your office the most right now?
Mostly, a lot of we're doing a lot of marriage counseling. There's a lot of couples that are really, really struggling to figure out how do we do this, because we don't know how to do marriage. We get married. We get married based on some really unrealistic idea of what it's going to look like.
Expectations.
And yes, yep. And a lot of times we think we know the person we're getting married to, and it turns out we really don't. And as believers, we have to make that work. Yeah. So a lot of times we don't have the first idea. We don't know how to communicate effectively. We become each other's enemies. Yeah. And that is, again, a scheme of the enemy, because if he can get us to attack each other, then we aren't able to have the marriages that God created us to have. And then our families are affected, our children are affected, and on and on. But I'm really, really excited about some things I'm seeing. And my husband is actually a life coach now too, and we're working with some couples. We are sadly seeing quite a bit of infidelity in the Christian, even in the church, and it's because we don't know how to protect we don't know how to affair-proof our marriages. We don't know how to communicate our needs. We don't know what needs are okay and what are selfish. We don't even, honestly, a lot of times what we're finding is we don't know it's okay to say what our needs and wants are. Yeah. It's this complicated thing, because as Christians, we think we're supposed to forget, forgive, move, or forgive, forget, move on. That is not what God says. It's we do have to forgive, but we have to know what we're forgiving. And when we're doing life with a partner and you're just running through the days, there's a lot of resentments that can build up that we don't even say anything about until we've got a mountain in front of us and we don't know how to navigate it. So we're working with some couples. There's some really wonderful curriculum that we're using out of one type is out of Focus on the Family that has just been really fun for couples. Even couples that are in crisis are enjoying it because there are prompts that ask you to talk about things with your spouse that you have never talked about or thought about talking about, and helping us to see the treasure that we have in our spouse. When you're blessed with a spouse, you have to know to look at them as the treasure, as God's son, as God's daughter, and how they're supposed to be treated. But we think that we can talk to them any way that we want. They're just going to love us and forgive us. It's just how it is, and they'll forgive me. Yeah. But those little comments along the way really do damage. But so some of that is what we're working on that a lot because I think God is wanting to do a whole different thing with families, getting them strong and fortified from the get-go, like equipping them early on. Yeah. And even with we've seen some premarital counsel or premarital couples getting ready to get married, and we realize they don't know each other, and we got to hurry up and get them acquainted with each other on the important points.
Yeah, because we're acquainted with the other things.
Yeah,
but we're not acquainted with what we need to be.
You know what?
For a lifetime.
We usually choose a spouse based on attraction. Are we attracted, and then do we have compatibility? But we don't talk about how we handle money. What are you like when you get angry? What are you like when you're sick? What do you like when, you're discouraged, and what did you learn from your family that you just do on autopilot, Yeah. So we're digging into that a little bit more. So even if a couple has made a decision, they are married and they are like, oh my goodness, what have I done?
Not too late.
It's not too late. No. That wasn't a mistake. God is going to use that to help them to be. A lot of times it's our marriages that make us get on our knees before the Lord and make us crucify the flesh and in a good way, Yeah,
I always said that I knew I was selfish before I got married, but then when you get married, you realize just how selfish you are. I mean, and I think that's why God, again, marriage isn't for everybody, but marriage is probably the biggest catalyst for a decrease in your selfishness in this world.
Yes, true.
So,
and then babies.
And then, oh my gosh. And then, that's what I'm saying. And then you get a family of 5 and you realize, wow, I'm more selfish even more than I thought. Susan, this is hard for me. I want to keep talking, and we might just literally have to have you back because there's so much still on the bone that I think we could talk about.
Yeah.
And there's just so much meat there but I told my wife I'd be home at a certain time, and I think that's important to honor that, right?
I
right, Susan?
love that you're doing that. Good for you. I completely validate that.
But here's the thing. But before we go, I want to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests on the Central Weekly. How has God been working in your life lately? So we are going to take a quick break for that, but we'll have you right back. I'm just literally going to hit pause and then hit back again.
I can't wait.
Don't go anywhere. All right, Susan Dalrymple.
Dalrymple.
Oh, I thought ripple like a ripple in a chip.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Well,
there's an M in there.
Well, here's what we're gonna do. We're asking you to wrap up our conversation.
Okay.
That was too short. How has God been working in your life, Susan?
Oh, Dalrymple. Okay, I'm happy to tell you that. So my sweet husband just retired from his career at Walgreens 2 weeks ago. And he had gotten his life coach certification prior to that. And the plan was that he was going to be doing what I'm doing. And God is, we thought we were going to be doing it completely separate, but it's looking like now we're working a lot with couples. The couples are just coming out of the woodwork, and we are loving it. But it's kind of, so I'm 58. My husband is 65, and we kind of thought, well, when he retired, we might slow down. We have been so dang busy that with all good stuff, we just can't wait to get up in the morning, because it's like, okay, Lord, what do you have next? It's all when he honestly probably should have been doing this a long time ago. But when you're functioning in the way that God created you, it's a blast. It's just really fun.
I think Les said the other day, his sweet spot.
Yes.
Functioning in your sweet spot.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So, yeah.
Susan, I'm so glad to have this conversation, even if it was too short. And it's neat here's our full circle conversation moment. It's neat to know a little tiny bit about your past and know how God is now using that for the betterment of so many other people, and especially couples in our church family and around Southern Illinois. So thanks for sitting in.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Keep it up, okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Susan. Bye.
Bye.
What a good conversation.
I truly love her and Les.
Just the future is so bright with it. I told her a couple times in that conversation, the light that she brings is so bright and it's shareable. Does that sound weird? That sounds kind of weird. Right?
Yeah, no, I don't know. One of the things that always impresses me about Susan, and I've told her this as well, but like, she just carries such an encouraging, joyful spirit.
Yep.
But day in and day out literally helps people through some of the toughest, heaviest junk.
She's hearing the worst of it. But she's bringing in the best.
There would be valid cause for her to get jaded and cold, but she's the opposite of those things, and I'm so glad about that.
Super good. I'm glad she was on. I'm glad that you're listening, and that's it for episode number 91 of the Central Weekly. John, see you later.
See you, Jared.
Bye, guys.